Monday night, September 3rd, 1666. If you stood on the south bank of the River Thames and looked north, you would not see the London of history. You would not see a city. You would see a furnace. The air is not just hot, it is solid. A physical wall of heat that can be felt on the skin from half a mile away across the water. The noise is deafening, a roar like 1,000 thunderstorms, punctuated by the cracks of timber exploding and the shrieks of women. The diarist John Evelyn, watching his world end from the safety of the South Bank, described it simply as a horrid, malicious, bloody flame. For 10 miles around, the night has been banished. It is light enough to read a letter at midnight. The greatest city in England, the rising capital of a global empire, is being erased. But to understand how a metropolis turns to ash, to understand the physics of this apocalypse, we must go back 48 hours, before the terror, before the fire, to a quiet Sunday morning in a bakery on Pudding Lane. London, 1666. To the modern eye, it would look less like a city and more like a fire trap designed by a madman. It is a medieval labyrinth enclosed within ancient Roman walls. The population has exploded to nearly 500,000, cramming into narrow tenements where the sheer density of humanity is suffocating. The logic of urban planning does not exist here. Houses are built with jettying, a technique where each upper floor protrudes further out than the one below to maximize square footage. In the narrowest alleys, neighbors on top floors can lean out and shake hands across the street. This architecture creates tunnels of shadow below and perfect bridges for fire above. It is a city of wood, oak, elm, and pine, timber frames filled with lath and plaster, coated in black pitch to keep out the rain. It is a city of straw. Despite laws banning it, thatch roofs are everywhere. And it is a city that smells of unwashed bodies, of rotting garbage in the gutters, and of the coal smoke that stains the buildings black. And the city is thirsty. It has been a long, hot summer. A drought has gripped the southeast of England since November. 10 months with almost no rain. The timber frames of the houses are bone dry. The thatch is like kindling. The warehouses along the river, in the very heart of the trade district, are stuffed with the fuel of empire: oil, tallow, hemp, pitch, brandy, coal, and gunpowder. But there is a darker shadow hanging over the city than just the threat of fire. Only the year prior, the Great Plague had killed 100,000 Londoners, nearly a quarter of the population. On many doors you can still see the faded red crosses and the desperate scrawl, "Lord, have mercy upon us." The city is exhausted. It is suffering from a collective trauma. It is recovering. It is a survivor. But it is also a powder keg. All it needs is a spark. Pudding Lane, a narrow strip of cobblestones near London Bridge. Here stands the bakery of Thomas Farriner, the King's baker. He supplies the ship's biscuits for the Royal Navy. On the evening of September 1st, Farriner does what he has done 1,000 times. He rakes up the coals in his oven, ensures the fire is dampened, and climbs the stairs to bed. He leaves his daughter and his maidservant sleeping soundly. The house is quiet. The city sleeps. But fire is patient. Sometime around 1 a.m. on Sunday, September 2nd, a stray spark finds a pile of brushwood prepared for the morning baking. It catches. It is small at first, almost innocent. It climbs the curtains. It tastes the dry timber of the ceiling. Farriner wakes to the smell of smoke. The lower floor is already impassable. There is no way out through the door. In a panic, he, his daughter, and one servant climb out of the upper window and crawl along the gutter to the neighbor's house. They are safe. But the maidservant is too afraid of heights to climb. She stays behind. She looks down at the street, then back at the flames. She does not jump. She becomes the first victim of the Great Fire. Her name is lost to history, but her death marks the beginning of the end. In 1666, there is no fire brigade. Firefighting is a community effort. Neighbors rush in with leather buckets and fire squirts, primitive hand pumps that look like large syringes. Usually this is enough. Londoners are used to fires. But this fire is different. It has an ally. A strong, dry wind is blowing from the east. It takes the flames and pushes them hard into the Star Inn yard next door, which is full of hay. The fire grows instantly from a domestic accident into a neighborhood crisis. The constables arrive. They see the danger. The wind is driving the sparks toward the riverside warehouses. They know the physics of fire in London. They know the only way to stop it is to starve it, to use fire hooks to tear down the neighboring houses and create a gap, a fire break. But for that, they need permission. They send for the Lord Mayor, Sir Thomas Bloodworth. Bloodworth arrives. He is a man out of his depth. He looks at the burning bakery. He looks at the houses that need to be demolished, houses owned by wealthy landlords who will demand compensation. He hesitates. He is worried about the cost. He is worried about his reputation. He turns to the anxious firefighters and delivers one of the most infamous lines in the history of leadership. Pish, a woman might piss it out. With that dismissal, he returns to his bed. He has just condemned London to death. By dawn, the fire has mocked Bloodworth's arrogance. It reaches the riverside warehouses. Now it is no longer burning wood. It is burning the concentrated energy of the world. Oil, tallow, spirits. The fire turns liquid. It flows down the streets like lava, pouring into the Thames and floating on the water. Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist and clerk of the Acts to the Navy Board, wakes up. He looks out his window and sees a fire not just consuming houses, but leaping over them. The wind is carrying burning embers, firebrands, hundreds of yards through the air. They land on dry thatch roofs blocks away, starting new fires instantly. The fire is flanking the defenders. Pepys records a heartbreaking detail. The pigeons. They refuse to leave their nests. They hover over their burning balconies, circling in confusion until their wings are singed and they drop, burning, out of the sky into the streets below. Panic sets in. The churches are full, not with worshippers, but with furniture. People are frantically trying to save their goods. The streets are clogged. The price of renting a cart skyrockets from a few shillings to half a fortune in a matter of hours. Those who can't pay simply carry what they can on their backs: sick relatives, musical instruments, feather beds. Pepys himself, realizing the fire is coming for his district, rushes to his garden. He digs a hole. In a surreal moment of domestic comedy amidst the apocalypse, he buries his most valuable possessions to save them from the flames: his naval papers, his bottles of wine, and a wheel of expensive Parmesan cheese. By Sunday afternoon, the city is a bottleneck. There is only one escape route: the river. The Thames becomes a floating refugee camp. The scene is biblical. London Bridge, the only crossing to the south, is on fire. The flames form a great arch over the water, trapping the ships beneath. The heat is so intense that people on the boats are forced to cover their faces with water-soaked cloths, even in the middle of the river. The wind is howling, whipping the smoke into a blinding fog that turns day into night. King Charles II takes command. He realizes the mayor is useless. He overrides the civilian government. He orders the wholesale demolition of houses to create fire breaks. He rides through the streets himself, his face covered in soot, handing out gold coins to the workers, trying to rally the men to fight. But the fire is moving faster than the hooks can pull down the walls. It is outrunning human effort. Monday comes, but the sun does not. The smoke is so thick that London is plunged into a twilight gloom. The fire has created its own weather system. The rising heat sucks in oxygen from the surrounding streets, creating gale-force fire winds that drag people toward the flames. The Royal Exchange, the financial heart of the empire, falls. The wealthy bankers watch as their gold melts. The very stone of the buildings is exploding. The moisture trapped inside the ancient stones boils instantly, turning rocks into grenades that shower the firefighters with shrapnel. And with the fire comes the paranoia. The people refuse to believe this is an accident. They have just survived a plague. Now they face fire. It feels coordinated. Rumors fly that this is an attack. It is the French, it is the Dutch, it is a Catholic plot to burn a Protestant city. Mobs begin to roam the streets armed with iron bars. They are looking for foreigners. A blacksmith attacks a Frenchman simply for carrying a box of tennis balls, screaming that they are fireballs. A woman with chickens in her apron is beaten because the mob thinks the chickens are incendiary devices. The city is tearing itself apart. The king has to deploy the royal guards, not just to fight the fire, but to save innocent foreigners from being lynched by their neighbors. Tuesday, September 4th, the Day of Judgment. The fire pushes west toward the greatest prize of all, St. Paul's. For centuries, St. Paul's had stood as the spiritual fortress of London. It was a giant, a massive Gothic structure, much larger than the current cathedral, dominating the skyline. The people believed it was invincible. It was God's house. The stone walls were thick, the roof was high. The stationers and booksellers of Paternoster Row, the center of England's publishing industry, had filled the crypt of the cathedral with their entire stock. Thousands of books, manuscripts, and historical records were stacked in the churchyard and the vaults, sealed behind stone. They were convinced the holy ground would protect them. But St. Paul's was under renovation. It was surrounded by wooden scaffolding. For the fire, this was a ladder. The flame caught the dry scaffolding. It climbed the walls. It reached the roof. And the roof of old St. Paul's was made of lead, acres of lead sheeting. The heat becomes so intense that the metal reaches its melting point. John Evelyn watches in horror as a river of molten lead pours down the rain gutters, glowing white-hot. It splashes onto the pavement, blocking the streets with liquid metal. The very stones of the cathedral begin to glow red. Then the roof collapses. The burning timber and tons of molten lead crash into the crypt below. The books, the theology, the history, the literature of England, they don't just burn, they explode. The lead seals the heat, turning the crypt into a pressure cooker. St. Paul's doesn't just fall, it detonates. The sound of the stones cracking is heard miles away. The spiritual heart of London is gone. While St. Paul's burns in the west, a different crisis emerges in the east. The fire is inches away from the Tower of London. The Tower is not just a prison and a palace, it is the nation's arsenal. It holds tons of black powder, gunpowder. If the fire breaches the walls and reaches the stores, the resulting explosion will flatten what little is left of the city. It will destroy the bridges. It will kill the thousands of people huddled on the riverbanks. It will be the end of London. The civilian leadership has failed. The buckets have failed. The hooks have failed. It is time for the military option. The Navy arrives from the dockyards. These are men who understand destruction. They do not ask for permission. They do not worry about lawsuits. They use gunpowder against the fire. They begin to blow up entire rows of houses before the fire can reach them. The sound of explosions mixes with the roar of the wind. It is a brutal arithmetic. To save the city, they must destroy it. They create a deadline, a gap of rubble too wide for the flames to jump, and then a mercy. On Tuesday night, the wind drops. The fire, starved of fuel by the demolitions and deprived of the wind that drove it, begins to falter. It runs into the brick walls of the temple area. It hits the rubble of the demolished houses near the tower. It flickers. It gasps. Wednesday morning brings a silence more terrifying than the roar. The fire is under control, but London is gone. The sun rises, but it is a blood-red disk behind the smog. The camera of history pans over a wasteland. It looks like the aftermath of a nuclear blast. 373 acres are scorched earth. 13,200 houses have been incinerated. 87 churches, 44 company halls, the Royal Exchange, the Custom House, St. Paul's Cathedral, Newgate Prison, and 3 city gates, all turned to dust. Outside the city walls, in the fields of Moorfields, a refugee crisis unfolds. 100,000 people, a fifth of the city's population, are camping in the mud. They have lost their homes, their businesses, their clothes, and their past. They are starving. The king orders bread to be brought in from the navy stores to prevent a famine. The heat in the ruins remains for weeks. The ground is too hot to walk on. The cellars, filled with coal, continue to burn underground for months, glowing like the vents of hell. London is described by witnesses as a stony desert. Remarkably, the official death toll is recorded as only 6 people, but this is a lie of history. It is a statistical impossibility. The heat was so intense it cremated bodies completely, leaving nothing to count. The poor, the elderly, the sick trapped in their homes, they vanished without a trace. The true toll likely runs into the thousands. In the aftermath, the hunt for a scapegoat began. A simple-minded French watchmaker named Robert Hubert is seized. Under confusion and duress, he confesses to starting the fire at the bakery. He is tried and hanged. It is only after his death that authorities discovered he wasn't even in London when the fire started. He arrived 2 days later. He was innocent. But the city needed blood to pay for the fire. However, from this blackened canvas, from this smoking ruin, an opportunity arose. The Great Fire was a tragedy, but it was also a cleansing. It erased the medieval mistakes. It sterilized the city. The rats that carried the plague were dead. The filth was burned away. The overcrowded slums were gone. Architects like Sir Christopher Wren presented grand visions to the king. They wanted London to be a rational city of the Enlightenment, wide, straight boulevards, geometric piazzas, a city of logic like Paris or Rome. But the people of London were stubborn. They were merchants. They wanted their land back. They wanted their shop to be exactly where it was before. The complexity of property rights defeated the grand designs. The old medieval street map was preserved. If you walk in the city of London today, you are walking on the medieval layout. But the king issued a new decree: no more wood. London would be a city of brick and stone. The dangerous jetties were banned, the streets were widened, and rising above the new skyline was Wren's masterpiece, a new St. Paul's. Not a dark Gothic spire, but a magnificent dome of white Portland stone, a symbol of reason and resilience that would dominate the skyline for centuries. Near Pudding Lane, Wren built the Monument, a single Doric column topped with a gilded urn of fire. It stands 202 feet tall. If you were to lay the column flat on the ground, its tip would touch the exact spot where Thomas Farriner's oven once stood. It is a permanent scar, a reminder of the night the sky turned red. The Great Fire of 1666 wiped out the physical history of medieval London. It destroyed the artifacts of 1,000 years, but in doing so, it forged the modern city. The London we know today, the financial capital, the global hub of glass and steel, is the direct child of that inferno. It is a city built on a layer of ash. History is often a story of slow evolution, but sometimes change comes in a violent burst. The fire reminds us that civilizations are fragile, that our homes and our monuments are temporary, and that sometimes, for the new world to be born, the old one must burn.